Let's use another example. So using the adjustment brush. Perfect example. We're back to that helmet. We can't really do much about the edge here. We can attend to that in Photoshop. We'll get to that another day. But for this, let's say we wanted to lighten this area up a little bit more, bring out some of the detail and the texture inside the helmet. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and paint a little bit just to get started. Now remember, it defaulted to a one-stop exposure adjustment. Okay, that's, you can leave it high like that just while you're editing, just so you can see things. But that's not really what we want. That's definitely not the look we're going for. But this is the shadow area. So if I open up the shadows and bring the exposure back down to 0, we can kind of get an idea of what that texture and that detail might look like. We can also open up the black areas or bring them down a little bit maybe, just to kind of open up the shadows. There is a point of diminishing returns. You can see here, I mean, we're getting too weird looking, but we do want to see something. Now you could have it overall adjust like this. And then, if I need to make a new one, just for this little area right in here in the earpiece, I can add one right on top of it. Okay, so let's open up the shadows a bit and bring the exposure down just a smidge. Cool. All right, so if we get out of the adjustment brush here, and we do our little split left and right, wow, what a huge, huge difference. Okay, you can see this is our before and this is our after. If I move this over, zoomed in, it looks kind of funky. You might need to readdress that. But this is what we had before and what we had after. Another reason why you want to make sure that you've got the exposure in camera is because if it's too dark, you're going to have a hard time pulling that information back out of it. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're shooting. I think we mentioned that we want to air to overexpose a little bit by maybe a half or a stop or more, but not to the point where you're blowing out everything. The highlights are going too bright, so you lose detail in those highlights. So here, not too bad. We can go back here. It's reminder is it's non-destructive, so if I need to, I can go back in and dial things back in or remove them completely if I need to. And so here, if I bring that back down a little, and bring that down and bring the shadows up, that looks a little bit better. Some detail. We can actually punch up the clarity if we need to, and then maybe open up the shadows a smidge more. And if there's a color cast to it, we can actually remove some of the saturation because it looked like it was going a little yellow. Cool. Actually, it looks a lot better if I do say so myself. Okay, so what have we done so far? We've done our cropping. We've done our spot removal tool. We've done our adjustment brush. A couple other little things that we can play with, little tweaky things. Let's go back to this image here, and let's add a radial gradient or radial filter to the image. So I'm going to click on this. You'll get very similar options as we just had. And what this does is it creates like a circular shape or oval shape. So let's get it close. I can move it around. I got that little hand tool in the middle, and you've got these little arrow or little boxes on the edges here. So I can go in and make it wider or taller or whatever I need to do. So if I go in and let's say I'm going to move the exposure a lot. So see what it's doing? Actually, let me go the other direction. If I make it negative, it's giving me this darker vignette. Okay, vignetting is where you get the edges are darker than the central part of the image. And so we can actually use that to our advantage and make this kind of interesting effect. especially since we're shooting, our focus here is on this, piece of jewelry. We don't need everything to be tack sharp or, at the same value. By creating a different change here on the edges, it draws the viewer's eye into the lighter area here. And that's kind of the goal with, shooting jewelry or shooting, certain things. You can do it with people, for focusing on their face or whatever. Here we have the feather of the mask. So you can see here, it either, the feather is really, really soft, or we can make it super defined, which we don't want to do for that, but maybe we want to lower it a little bit so it looks a little bit more subtle, not like we actually created an effect here. It's going to darken anything outside of the circle or oval. And if I want to invert that, let's say I want to darken the inner part, I can say invert mask, and it really affects the interior portion. So if we like the outside and we wanted to just lighten up the center part, we can do that. Okay, so I'm going to put it back to the way it was. And again, if we wanted to, adjust we adjusted the exposure. If we want to adjust anything else, maybe take the saturation down a little bit so it's a little less saturated on the outside. Clarity, give it more of that soft focusy feel. It doesn't quite work as well, but I think that's pretty close. Okay, and so if I change this to auto, go off of it, now we can see what we have. Does it look real? That's the goal. Or does it look too fake? Here it looks a little too fake. I want to make it so it's just on the edges. Maybe, yeah, that's cool. Lower that a bit. I think it needs to get wider. There we go. So we've adjusted the exposure. And we can play with some of these other things here. There we go. That's a little bit more natural looking. Okay, and again, if we go back and get out of this mode, so we can do the before and after. Again, this is what we started with from the beginning, not what we just did, but huge, huge difference. Perfect. So in that case, that's the radial filter, and you can roll over it again and you'll see what the tool name is. And then the last one we're going to do, let's do this image here. I think that's probably a good one to work on, is we'll do the graduated filter. Okay, and that's this one right here. Again, everything's going to look very similar. The graduated filter, similar to the radial filter, it blends from one point to the other, but this one instead goes linearly, and it goes from top to bottom. And so let's go ahead and make, an overall adjustment here. So I took that way, way down. Here, if I need to, I want to drag this even farther down. You can see how it's blending from this top edge to this bottom edge. If I need to move it around, I can move it around. Whoops. Okay, so I can move that around as I need it. Now, that's not the effect I'm looking for, but maybe it is where I want to have that a little bit more subtle. I could use a radial as well to kind of focus in on this. And, go for that blend. Here, let's see, for this. Let's try this one. Again, we'll make a new one. I'm going to blend this down. Now, I don't have any shots from outdoors in this set, but if you wanted to, you can actually play with the color. So if I click on color down the bottom here, I can specify, a color to warm things up if I wanted to. maybe a little bit more red. I don't know why I'd want to do that, but, or you can use one of these presets that you maybe saved from a different shoot. Okay, so that's cool because it kind of gives, if it was a landscape or something like that, you can actually intensify the color of the sky. And then here I can play with the saturation, maybe lower the exposure a little bit. So you can kind of see the effect. Maybe this is not appropriate for this image, but you get to see the effect here and see what your capabilities are in Lightroom. So just a recap. We've done the adjustment brush, spot removal tool, graduated filter, and radial filters here. Really, those are the key elements. Red eye reduction, if you have that in your shot, you can play with that tool. I don't have anything here to demo that, but it's not difficult to use. And so here, I'm just going to go back in. Oh, and we did the crop as well. So with that, we have all our images that we've manipulated, and they'll be like this anytime you come back into Lightroom. And so you can create derivative files, JPEGs or TIFFs from here to send out to print, and so on. So there's a lot of things you can do from this point on. These are the basics. These will get you started for 90% of your work. As we move through the semester, we'll go ahead and highlight some additional features just to kind of give you some more tools at your disposal. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or contact me via the message board.